Alright, so this will be a feedback follow-up for PandaMeister. I had previously reviewed this and gave my feedback in text form, and so I wanted to do like a video follow-up. I'm trying to get more used to this format, try to be a bit more concise with my thoughts, and try to showcase like, hey, in this situation, here is the example or concept that I was talking about. You had previously requested that's like, hey, how do I build up my defense and stuff like that, and that's complicated. The short version of it is that you just block, right? And throughout the set, you'll notice that you try to keep pressing your advantage in areas where you have to understand that your turn is over, right? There are Paul is not really a character where he can steal turns like, say, a Fang, maybe a Hwoarang or whatever. He doesn't have like the string pressure Hwoarang does. He doesn't have the evasive tools that Fang does, etc., etc. It's like, as bullshit as this sounds, Paul, to a certain degree, is very honest in terms of his offense, right? A lot of times, you poke and your turn is over because you're at -9 or -6 or whatever, and you can't move around too much. You don't have like the freedom of movement, and etc., etc. Is Paul fully honest? No, he's full of shit. Like, he's got so many bullshit moves, but that's a whole nother thing, right? The concepts I'm going to be talking about is that we're going to start from the beginning, and that is to develop your defense, accept that your turn is over, and accept that, like, hey, I did a move, my opponent blocked the move, and I'm at -9, and I can't keep trying to press my advantage. You just gotta hold the mix-up. And I think this will be really showcased in the Paul versus Paul mirror, and we're just gonna go ahead with it. So, right here, right? You're doing the neutral dance, which is awesome. That's fine. You're not really throwing out too many buttons, but your opponent's at -9 and their turn is over. They cannot move. They take whatever mix-up you have to throw at them, right? And right here, you do a jab, and then you try to go for another move. One, if your opponent's turn is over and up close to you like that, in those situations, you would consider Demo Man, right? The opponent's up right in front of your face. It's not very likely that he'll be able to backdash, and even if he does backdash, I don't think at -9 that he'll be able to backdash and mess up the clean hit for Demo Man, right? So a lot of times is when you're thinking about, like, all right, is my turn over, is my opponent's turn over, etc. There's a lot of things that factor into that, right? What frame advantage, disadvantage are they at, and also what's the distance that you're looking at. So first, your opponent's turn was over, and you had the chance to apply mix-up, which we can go into more detail later, right? The more important thing is you do a jab, which is fine, but a jab is only +1, and then you try to press something after, and then the opponent's ready to just jab check you, right? Use that as information, one, right? First, it's that, okay, my opponent's not going to respect my little frame advantage situations, right? When you're +1. Right, if he's not going to respect you at +1 after a jab, then it's also likely that he's not going to respect you after +1 on something like quarter circle back 4. And to be fair, he doesn't have to, right? +1 isn't like a huge amount of advantage, but it's those things that's like, okay, the important thing to understand is that you're facing an opponent who is ready to challenge you, and that's something that you have to take into account. So we'll see how that progresses. We'll see how that plays out as the matches progress. Right, so right here, you do some moves, you block this, you do back 1. Back 1 is a fantastic move, blah, 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 blah. You're -9. And then you're either trying to move or you're trying to press something, and then you just get hit by 4. Thankfully, it wasn't a counter hit, so you weren't pressing a move, but you have to understand and recognize the situations of, okay, my opponent blocked my move, my turn is over. Don't try to move. If you try and move, if you try to backdash, you're gonna get clipped because one, neutral guard sucks. Two, I think we posted the video a few times where it's like trying to backdash at -9, you just get hit by so many things that you wouldn't, right? I think the example is like Kazumi's flash punch just eviscerates your neutral guard, and then you just get hit when you normally would not have. So remember, in those like heavy disadvantage situations, but not quite punishable, right? The -7 to -9, even -6. Paul's backdash isn't really amazing, so he has to respect being at -6. You have to take it into account, right? It's like, all right, you are locked in place. That's it. I don't know what happened there, but try not to use forward 3 in neutral. It's like fine, I guess. It worked out, but try to avoid that. That was a good whiff punish. You do this a lot, right? So the opponent does something, and then you're doing a power crush. The thing that I don't understand is you'd like to use power crush a lot at the wall, the high and the mid, and it's like in here it kind of works out, but as we see as the matches progress, your opponent starts to respect you in the sense of they don't press buttons when their back is to the wall, and they just kind of block whatever you do. This is a problem because if they don't mash and they just block, one, they can just duck under back 1+2. But if they block forward 2+3, right, your fancy new mid power crush, Paul launches you, right? You're facing another Paul, he's just gonna back 3 you. There's no pushback where it messes up like, you know, old pre nerf forward 1+4 did. So again, it's another thing you have to take into account is that in the neutral, the opponent is challenging you, but here at the wall, what are they doing, right? Try to contextualize everything about your opponent in X situation. What does my opponent like to do? In Y situation, what does my opponent like to do, right? That is always changing, and you always have to take that into account. Huh. That's funny. I didn't. Plus 204. Wow. Okay. And you're gonna see this happen in the later rounds, right? You immediately sidestep, and you can see Paul gearing up for up back 2, right? He's doing the. I don't even know what the move is. What's like the type of? Is it arm swing? I'm not sure. I love the move, but right. So the first part is, why are you sidestepping into it, right? In the previous round, your opponent's trying to sidestep, but they don't press any buttons. They're not doing anything that's going to be like, all right, they're going to get clipped by up back 2. And it's like, yes, your opponent is moving around to some degree, but I just don't think it's like at the start you want to start with sidestep into up back 2. Up back 2 is kind of slow at 20 frames, right? You don't want to add a sidestep and further increase that time, right? If you're just trying to test your opponent and see what they want to do, back 1 is perfectly serviceable for this distance, right? And think about it, like your opponent's not sidestep ducking, right? Your opponent is just sidestepping at the previous round start. So back 1 would have been perfectly fine. The problem, as we're about to see this Paul ready to rip, is if you do sidestep and up back 2, you're doing a really slow move, and Paul and any opponent just throwing anything out with like a pixel of track, that doesn't work, with like a frame of tracking, whatever. Let's just see what happens. Rip. That was a weird combo, dude. Okay, so again, it's another situation of you have to ask yourself, what are you doing in this situation, right? Look, you do back 2, you hit, you're +4, and more importantly, force crouch, right? If the opponent is force crouch, they have very limited options. They're limited to sidestep in one direction and wall standing moves, right? Paul doesn't really have a full crouch mix-up going, and he doesn't. If anybody ever thinks that, full crouch down forward 2, or down forward 1+2, that's a full crouch mix. I'm like, no, that's stupid. So he's limited to his wall standing moves, and all of those wall standing moves, right? Even his fastest one, let's say something like wall standing one, or wall standing dick, or dick jab, at 10 frames is gonna have 4 frames of lag on it. So anything up to 13 frames will beat it, and anything 14 frames will trade. Back 3 won't necessarily beat a trade with the dick jab because the dick jab will high crush, but that's a whole different story. So right here, you just get hit with a wall standing one, right? Why? What exactly were you doing that caused you to get hit by it? And it's not like the end of the world, right? It's only a little bit of damage, some plus save, but it's not like Paul can really do much in that distance, and he's not really going to capitalize off of that, right? It's not like he can just demo man you, because honestly, I'm not even sure if the clean hit works in that distance. But the problem isn't necessarily that oh no, like the Paul hit you for 10 points of damage or whatever. The problem is in situations that whatever you're pressing is, you are not adjusting your offense to your frame situations, right? When you're +4 when you're +4 force crouch, you're not doing a move that covers any of the wall standing options, right? Like Magic 4 would have easily beaten that, right? Or if you really wanted to risk it, down 1+2, a heavy call up, but dude, at 12 frames, nobody's gonna, especially when you're 4 frames ahead of the opponent, right? Think about it again. The fastest his wall standing one is gonna come out is like 14 frames. Down 1+2 beats that clean, right? And I don't want to go too much into detail because it could be that you're just waiting to get more information on your opponent, which is fine. But the main problem remains is you're doing something that's too slow. You're not leveraging the advantage or respecting your opponent's turn when you should be, right? For example, when you have the advantage, you keep trying to press another button. It's just too slow for the situation. And when you're at disadvantage, right, when you've ended your turn, you keep trying to press buttons that result in the opponent just counter hitting you out of whatever you're going to try. It's those things that you got to keep in mind, right? Develop that sense of like, okay, I am at disadvantage here. I just got to block the mix up and wait for give it like a second, and then when it returns to neutral, start using movement or start implementing neutral. That was unfortunate. Okay, so right there, right, that was a good adjustment. You backdashed, and you just waited a little bit to see what your opponent was going to do. They went for Corsical back one, and it looked like you had the whiff punish on deck, but unfortunately it was just kind of like an input error. Not the worst, right? But again, that's what you want to do, is that you want to backdash until you have more information of who you're fighting against. This set's going to be weird because I think you're playing against your friends, right? So there could be a lot of like adjustments that both of you are making against each other that you wouldn't necessarily make against a different opponent or just a random. But I'm not really going to take that into account. I'm just going to take what I see at face value and just heads up, I guess. This kind of comes up as I'm not the biggest fan of letting that wall standing 3-2 rip. If this is because you knew your opponent was going to let you get away with it, sure. But it's like my impression that I get when I see stuff like that, it's more of like you're just doing it out of habit, like you're autopiloting, like your muscle memory is kicking in and you're just finishing the string, as opposed to you're just finishing the string because of your muscle memory, as opposed to finishing the string because you know your friend is going to try something. And you also do that a lot, right? Like the Paul your friend does up back 2 or down back 2, you block it and then you go for back 1. I don't think, well, okay, if it's because you think it's an 11 frame punish, it's not. But let's say you're trying to do it because you're anticipating your opponent trying to sidestep. Maybe I don't know. That's fine. It's fine. Never mind. Okay, so right there, right? This is another situation of you're going for constantly throughout the match. You go for these big Tekken, big power moves, and I'm not entirely sure why. Right? What is your reasoning in this situation to Death Fist? What are you hoping? What are you hoping to achieve here? Right? Your friend isn't necessarily going to suddenly do like a really slow move that'll get counter hit by Death Fist, right? He hasn't really shown that, except outside of like the round start. And I don't know. It's like Death Fist is a fast move, right? But it's like, why? If you do it at this situation with the Paul's back kind of to the wall, you risk having the pushback negated, right? If the Paul just sidesteps, he should. Then, granted, we'll see what happens. He should just sidestep you and launch you. It's like you're putting all this faith in a Hail Mary, and you don't need to. And that's like a constant theme throughout the match, right? Is that you constantly try to use your big powerhouse moves, hoping for some big reward or some big call out. And sometimes it works out, right? That's Paul. Sometimes the momentum just swings in your favor, and you keep snowballing, and then you go out of control and you get the round. But a lot of times it's like you just give up your turn or put yourself in a disadvantaged situation, or you're ingraining these into muscle memory or building bad habits that'll just hurt you later on in the future. Somehow it blocked. I'm not sure if the sidestep wasn't enough or what happened there, but it's like, and then right here, right, exactly, we see this. All right, so you block, you have Death Fist blocked, whatever, and then you try to backdash. Excuse me. I don't have enough information right now to determine, like, okay, yeah, you just like to backdash or try to move around a lot when your turn is over, right? And in this situation, it worked out fine because you had a lot of distance between you and your opponent. By the time your opponent is moving around or getting in close to you, the disadvantage you were at has long since passed, and you can move around a bit. But it's like you want to watch out for those moments. Like when you're playing, if you block, if you get down one blocked, if you get back one blocked, if you get while standing three blocked, etc., 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 and you catch yourself trying to move, keep in mind that that's like you don't want to autopilot that. You don't want to just automatically start moving around, because an opponent who notices this is gonna just take advantage of it and just demolish you. Or, as what will happen in Tekken 7, is that opponent will just throw out like a counter hit launcher, and it'll counter hit you because, again, you're trying to move when your turn is over, and it's just not going to work out in your favor. Right, and so here we see, well, your friend should have launched you, but you see it's like, as opposed to doing either of the power crushes, just do forward 1+2, right? You have a big... If you had enough time to do back 1+2 and the opponent just stands there and takes it, you had more than enough time to do forward 1+2 and keep your pressure going, right? Force the opponent into crouch, have them sort of under pressure and start sweating that, like, oh, I'm under pressure from a Paul and my back is to the wall. There's no point in doing back 1+2. Your friend isn't trying to press buttons at the wall. He's not trying to challenge you. He's not trying to get out of there with a bunch of panic moves, right? You need to utilize better tools at the wall pressure here, right? It's like forward 1+2, down forward 4 is solid, and maybe a corsical back 4, right? At the wall, it's great. It's homing, +1, wall splat, etc. It does everything you need, right? And so stuff like that. If you utilize your other tools at the wall like that. Don't just use the power crushes, especially against an opponent who hasn't really shown like any inclination of like, yeah, I'm gonna challenge and try to get off the wall with a bunch of panic moves. Like, no, your opponent this entire set, when the back is to the wall, just kind of like blocks, takes whatever mix-up you have, and then gets out of the way. Yeah, so again, you run into the situation of you try to sidestep, you try to do up back two in response to your opponent's sidestepping, and it's like out of range, and he's wow, I'm actually kind of surprised that I didn't hit him, but your friend just launches you. I think this is tough, right? In these early rounds, when you're still gaining information about what your opponent likes to do, try to stick to back one a bit more, right? One thing is for sure, your friend is not really duck that often in the neutral. Up back two isn't really going to get him. All you're doing with up back two is sacrificing your turn and risking getting counter hit, or as counter hit as you did in the previous rounds, or the opponent just, I guess, with punishing you. It's really about trying to utilize faster tools in order to keep your opponent in check or gain more information. But I think I'm losing my point there, but we'll keep going and see how it goes. Okay, so right there, right? What was your reasoning behind the get up kick, right? What the Paul didn't finish Demo Man. He's not dashing in necessarily, and maybe you were expecting him to dash in, but in my perspective, from just an outside perspective, it just looks like you're just mashing the three, hoping for either a counter hit launch, or because it's worked in the past, you're very happy with just get up kicks. And again, you need to experiment more with. Well, I'm not again because I haven't said this that much, but you need to experiment more with your grounded options. When you're on the ground, what can you do? You can hold back to get up safely. You can side roll. I think you can tech after the Demo Man whiffed. I have to test that, right? You have a lot of grounded options. You can also just stay on the ground and see what your opponent does and how they react to that, right? All of these options are available to you, and a lot more than just keep doing get up kicks and keep doing mid whatever Hail Mary get up kick, hoping for a big reward. And that's another aspect of defense, is try to practice just waiting, right? Exhibiting a bit more patience to see what your opponent does and then act accordingly. Maybe your opponent gets to dash in on you. That's fine. It's not like Paul has these crazy tech catch options or anything like that, right? It's just wait, see what your opponent does, and then adjust accordingly. Like if your opponent is very aggressive, do a toe kick to reset to neutral. If your opponent is very passive, try to disalign yourself from the wall. So use a side roll on your player one side. So side roll right, so that your back isn't against the wall when you're facing this Paul, right? Stuff like that. I'll just keep going. We'll see. Right. So see exactly. Look at what your friend did. Right. He side rolled. He stayed on the ground, waited for you to take the initiative, and then did the mid get up kick, knowing that Demo Man had whiffed. Right. And that's what I'm talking about. It's that. On your end, too often you try to keep pressing the offense, keep trying to press a button here and there and going for some sort of attack, when giving yourself a second or two of breathing room to just kind of like, all right, let me try something different, see what my opponent does, and then based on what my opponent does, choose my next method of attack, right? And this is a very like free form situation. There's no like, step-by-step process of like, all right, here's how to execute that, right? But it's something that you just got to start practicing. It could very well mean that you'll just get demolished for many rounds as you try and develop the skill, but it is worth it in the end, because Paul is a character that it's like, yes, he has all of these powerful moves, But a lot of the times, it's like the best things he has going for him is that he just has these generic options, and you utilize those generic options to, supplement your strengths. And those generic options also mean game mechanics, right? Paul doesn't have like a fancy get up off the ground. If you do spring attack, your opponent better be asleep at the wheel for you to do that, right? Because if you try and spring attack, you're just asking for trouble. The point being is this: you're not utilizing all of the game's mechanics to your advantage, and you need to do so in order to help. This will help vary up your timings. This will help you get information on your opponent. This will help you, it is always going to help you more than it will hurt you to take a second, use a generic option like movement, as opposed to just keep attacking. Okay, alright, so right there, maybe I went back too far, we'll see how it goes. Would Shredders have reached? Down 4-2 would whiff. Maybe Shredders would have reached. That's fine, let's keep going. Right. So you got the round there, which is fine. You did a big call out with Death Fist, and your opponent was trying to dig jab or something. It whiffed, and he died, which is fine. But you could also achieve the same result with just core circle back too, right? The backsway, if anything, would have 100% guaranteed the dick jab whiffing, right? And the core circle back two would have wall splat. You'd have easily done the same combo. Maybe it wouldn't have killed. I'd have to check that. But it's again, you constantly do these big call outs, these big power moves, and yeah, it works out sometimes, but half the time he just blocks, and you're at a disadvantage. You're minus 17 and you can't move, you can't do anything. You're constantly putting yourself at disadvantaged situations, and then you constantly keep trying to claw your way out with moves, and you're just building bad habits that are going to hurt you in the future. Right. Again, it's okay. I think I'm gonna cut it for here. I'm gonna continue to watch more of this series and try to just like give my 2 cents on it. But it's the situation of you just had Death Fist blocked. The pushback kicked in, making you safe. Essentially, awesome. What did you expect was gonna happen when you do back 1+2, right? Especially at the wall, your opponent will likely have caught on that you like doing the power crushes a lot, right? Your back 1+2 has 17 frames of lag on it, right? It's gonna take a lot longer to come out, and the opponent has free reign to do whatever he wants, and it's just like you're constantly in a disadvantaged situation, and you constantly try to power your way through it with some power moves, and you're building bad habits that'll hurt you in the future. That was impressive. That fucking pickup's hard. Good for him. Right, again, as we see, you try to do a get-up kick when you could have just waited to see what would happen. But more importantly, you're at the distance where you try to continuously attack. And this is, granted, this situation was a bit more difficult, right? You'd have to recognize like the distance and knew that wall standing 3 was gonna whiff. I very likely would have just done wall standing 3 as well. But again, it's like try to rein in all like the throwing out of moves, right? You're not necessarily doing any bad habits like trying to do 3-2 in neutral, trying to do back 1-2 all the time in neutral and finishing the string, etc., etc. But you have these bad habits of, I'm gonna keep pressing buttons and these big call out moves, or keep trying to challenge the situation or steal back my turn, etc. Whatever the reason is, and they're just gonna get you killed. You're gonna get counter hit out of stuff, or you'll get whiff punished. And we'll just see how it goes. Will it kill? Will it kill? Come on, James Chan. No. I remember this part. Yeah, I was so confused as to why you did 1-4 repeatedly. I don't quite understand. Is it because your friends started doing it? Like it was like a weird like monkey see monkey do situation. It's again that's whatever. I think it was funny. It's not the worst thing. Like I think 1-4 is pretty solid, but again, repeatedly doing it like that, you're asking to get low parried, as you saw here. Let's call it a wrap for this part, and I'm just gonna go into like my summary, right? Summary in neutral. Recognize when you're at an advantage or disadvantage, and try to adjust your options. It's, if you have the advantage, try to stick to like your faster tools. Don't just keep going for big call out moves that are just gonna get counter hit or whiff, etc. And if you're at disadvantage, right, don't keep trying to force it. Just block. Exercise patience, hang back, see what your opponent does, and then punish accordingly. Right? And yeah, like you're facing a Paul. Oh no, he's gonna poke a bunch and it'll be super safe all the time. That's fine, right? The important thing is you're not putting risk on yourself. You're letting the opponent do that. I'll talk about it. I think I'll talk about it more in the next part. It's just let's do the basics, right? Neutral. It's you're pressing too many buttons. You're trying to keep attacking when you need to just hang back and just wait, right? Give yourself some breathing room. If it's just a reset to neutral, that's fine. Just let it happen. And then as you gain more information on your opponent, you see what their habits are, you see where their gaps are, and then you take advantage of those gaps and capitalize on a flaw in their game plan. Right? That's where Paul shines the most. It's that defensive poke and punish style, seeing where the hole in their game plan is and then abusing it. Right? He's always regarded as like this fancy 50-50 mix-up character, and yeah, Demoman Deathfist is fucking hilarious, but 99% of the time it's not that. Right? Look at the success. More often than not, success with Paul is just you block a bunch and then you poke here and there, and then you take advantage of your opponent fucking up with your solid punishment tools, solid keep out, etc. If you want to be more defensive focused, a lot of it will start with patience, holding back, just block, and then waiting and starting to recognize matchup situations where it's like, okay, cool, my opponent did something punishable, or I know they're gonna go for a high, so I'll duck and punish, etc., etc. So try to focus on that. I'm gonna keep reviewing the set, but if you see like, hey, this is kind of like an outdated set, here's a more updated set with updated gameplay, let me know and I'll focus on that. But yeah, it's just kind of like you're too aggressive in situations where you don't need to be. Combos and Oki were fine. I strongly disagree with like your decisions at the wall, but it's not the focus of this video, but whatever. And then personal opinion stuff. I think I'll save that for my follow-up, like when I watch more of the matches and post my thoughts then. But yeah, if you have any more questions, and if you're like, hey, can you please cover these specific areas in your next follow-up or feedback, and you have like specific questions you want answered, let me know. and I'll try and focus on that and try to focus my discussion and rambling/ranting on that. Cool.